All right, stick with me here because what I'm about to tell you sounds exactly like the opening scene of a heavy-duty Hollywood war movie, except it's completely real. It happened last night, and the fallout is so overwhelming that even the experts have had to stop and figure out what the hell just happened. 3:58 a.m. Kursk border. The temperature is so low metal itself is shivering. The kind of cold where your breath fogs up inside the cockpit and disappears before it even thaws. And in that cold, in pitch-black darkness swallowing forests most people have never heard of, an old Ukrainian MiG-29 is screaming along just above the ground. Alone, following an oil pipeline like a blade slicing through the night. Ahead of it isn't a military convoy. It's a massive Russian oil refinery, Zhrevska Refinery, pumping fuel for an entire offensive. A facility responsible for tens of thousands of gallons a day, not small potatoes. This is the lifeblood of a war machine. And the kicker? This refinery had no idea a smart bomb was on its way to knock on the door. Not some half-assed strike. This was a meticulously planned Ukrainian hit built around a 20-minute window. Because what happened next? What unfolded in a few dozen seconds as that bomb fell from 8,000 meters, sent Russia's entire logistics capability in the sector reeling. But what makes this story truly wild isn't the moment of detonation. It's the fatal mistake that came before, letting a fully loaded fuel convoy prepare to roll out of the plant without realizing Ukraine had already turned the whole area into a strategic trap. Let me back up and give you the context, because context is the key to this whole thing. 3:58 a.m. Kursk border region. Pitch black, cold enough to freeze both metal and men. And in that breathless silence, a Ukrainian MiG-29 is skimming the treetops at 150 meters, hauling ass down a forest corridor into Russian territory. Its target, Zhrevska Oil Refinery, one of the last still functioning major refineries in western Russia after weeks of fires, explosions, and drone strikes. See, Russia is ramping up its winter offensive around Kharkiv-Kupiansk. Artillery shells, tanks, armored vehicles, everything runs on fuel. And the supply lines they're relying on, they're getting thinner, more fragile. 3 of the 7 big refineries in the region have already been knocked out or forced offline. That funneled all the pressure onto Zhrevska, a single choke point where Russia's fuel flow depends on keeping the whole offensive from collapsing. Ukrainian intel picked up at 22:40 last night a convoy of 32 fuel tankers fully loaded and sealed, scheduled to roll out the refinery's south gate at 4:20 a.m. That amount of fuel, if it reached the front, would power a massive barrage that could kill hundreds. No time to spin up more drones. No direct NATO involvement. No F-16 escort. If Ukraine wanted to stop that convoy before it melted into Russia's internal road network, they had to do it themselves, right now. In under 20 minutes. You see, war isn't decided by how many tanks or how many shells you fire. It's decided by fuel. If you break the fuel, you break the offensive. That's why before dawn, one Ukrainian pilot who's been flying the same MiG-29 longer than Ukraine has existed as an independent country, was ordered to take off. Fly low. Fly fast. Fly into one of the most heavily radar-covered areas in all of Russia. What he didn't know. Even before he lit the engines, 3 Russian radar systems, an S-400 in Kursk, a Bikum-3 in Stereoskal, and a Torm-2 parked next to the Belgorod industrial zone had already swept his exact flight path. He was flying straight into a layered air defense net any expert would flatly call a kill box. And tonight's mission was not allowed to fail. So here's how one pilot, on one night, ended up flying down the most dangerous radar corridor in Russia, trying to stop a war machine that runs on oil. From 150 meters, the MiG-29 slices along the first treetops in the Belgorod region like a knife skimming the ground, and from a distance you might think it's just a thin shadow slipping through the valley, but inside the cockpit it's a completely different world. There's no romance of the fighter pilot here. Just speed, instinct, and life or death calculations done in thousandths of a second. The pilot hugs the oil pipeline, an industrial artery running like a line on a map, because it follows low terrain, just enough to mask him from ground radar. Power lines and telecom poles flash past the canopy so fast the conscious mind doesn't register them. Only muscle memory and experience do. Below him, forest. Above him, a Russian radar web scanning every inch of sky. The SPO-15 threat warning lights up with red-yellow strobes flashing like a compass gone insane. It doesn't give range. It doesn't give altitude. It just gives direction and how much attention Russian radar is paying him. And at nearly 900 kilometers per h, you guess radar distance the old-school way, count Mississippi. 3 Mississippi, searching not locked. 2 Mississippi, it's interested. 1 Mississippi, it might be about to shoot. That's how Soviet and now Ukrainian pilots survive low-level runs through air defenses. And right now his SPO-15 is somewhere between 2 Mississippi and 1.5, enough to say all 3 Russian systems have shifted from search to track. S-400 from Kursk, long, heavy, precise sweeps. Biakum-3 from Stereoskal, shorter, sharper, like an electronic needle stabbing the sky. Tor M2 near Shebekino. Fast, close-in, brutal at low altitude. 3 layers, 3 scan patterns, 3 threats. None of them forgive mistakes. He keeps the MiG as low as possible, sometimes just meters off the treetops. 1 wrong pull and the jet clips the forest, and then no radar even needs to shoot him down. But there's another problem. At this altitude, he can't release the hammer bomb. For the guidance to work optimally, for the rocket motor to boost it high before diving onto the target, he needs several thousand meters of altitude. And he doesn't have it. He can't climb now. Climbing means lighting up like a neon sign for dozens of Russian radar antennas. He can only climb at the exact spot, the exact second. Fuel isn't on his side either. Gauge reads 2,300 kilograms. At low level, the 2 RD-33 engines guzzle fuel like freshmen at a frat party. 1 excessive missile break, 1 mistimed afterburner burst, and he won't have enough to make it back across the border. And that's not the last problem. In 8 minutes this low forest corridor ends, opening onto a flat 10-kilometer stretch of open ground before the industrial zone around Zarevska. On that open ground there are no trees, no parallel pipeline, no valleys for cover. On that open ground, Russian radar will see the full profile of the MiG, not clutter, not a blip, but a big, clear, easy-to-lock target. Time is slipping. 8 minutes, then open sky, then radar, then shooting gallery. What pilots call an area where only one thing is flying, and everything else is guns pointed at it. And the MiG keeps charging forward, hugging the pipeline, clinging to the forest, trying to stay in the dark just long enough to reach the point where the real mission begins. And then, like someone flipped the chaos switch, the SPO-15 goes from sporadic warnings to what every pilot describes the same way, exactly like a McDonald's kitchen at lunch rush. Lights strobe like crazy, strobes fire non-stop, and the tone in his headset snaps from slow beeps to a frantic barrage, like every radar in Western Russia just noticed he exists at the same moment. That means one thing: he's out of the forest and the entire Russian grid is staring right at him. 38 kilometers to the northeast, a number he doesn't see but feels in the scan rate, the S-400 starts narrowing its beam. And let me tell you why that's bad. When an S-400 is searching wide, it's like sweeping a flashlight around a dark room. When it narrows the beam, it's not searching anymore. It's found something. And when the beam collapses into a laser-thin line, it's tracking. 38 kilometers. Low altitude. Still strong enough to lock. Radar doesn't care if you're in a 30-year-old jet or a stealth fighter. It just needs a reflecting surface. And right now it has one. The MiG-29. The tone in his ears turns into one long, unbroken shriek. The most threatening sound a pilot can hear. Hard lock. Ready to fire. His reaction has to be instant. Not a second, not half a second. Instant. He rolls into a knife-edge turn, nearly 90 degrees bank, max G to one side, holding altitude on leftover wing lift, vectoring velocity perpendicular to the radar beam. Classic trick, something you only try after thousands of hours, 0 radial velocity. If you're neither closing nor opening range, Doppler radar can't see the frequency shift. No frequency shift equals sign, it can't separate you from the ground. For one almost impossible moment, the S-400 lock breaks. The SPO-15 drops from continuous tone back to fast beeps, almost pissed it lost the target. But the win lasts exactly 3 seconds. Because the Tor M2 near Shepakino lights up right then. If the S-400 is a sledgehammer, the Tor M2 is a scalpel, smaller, faster, deadlier at low level. Different band, different refresh rate, and it hunts things skimming the dirt. Like his MiG, SPO-15 strobes shift south, thick, sharp, short bursts. Tor has him. He dumps chaff, but not just one kind. First 2.5 centimeters chaff for X-band, aimed at the S-400, 120 bundles of aluminum-coated glass fibers exploding behind him like a glittering metal cloud in the dark. But Tor works K-band, higher frequency, shorter wavelength, so old chaff is useless. He hits the second button. Hundreds of tiny 4.3 mm bundles burst out. In seconds, the space behind the MiG becomes a chaff corridor, a tunnel of false returns that makes Russian radar guess which blip is real. But he doesn't stop there. Left thumb flips to the SPS-141 ECM pod trigger. Jamming kicks in like an invisible explosion, analyzes the Tor's frequency, and starts feeding fake signals back. Range gate pull-off. One of the most beautiful tricks in electronic warfare. Imagine the Tor shining a flashlight on him in the dark. His ECM creates a brighter fake target right next to him, then slowly drags that fake target away. The radar follows the decoy, and drops the real jet. That's why the Tor suddenly loses track. But the price of disappearing is he's now flying at 50 meters. 50 meters isn't flying. It's refusing to die for one more second. One power line, one tall tree, one gust, and you're no longer a pilot, you're part of the terrain. CFIT, controlled flight into terrain. What accident reports phrase politely, but really means you flew into the ground perfectly awake. The SPO-15 is still screaming from multiple directions. Russian radars haven't lost interest. They're just guessing where he is inside the chaos he created. But the mission won't let him stop. Because ahead, down the flight path, past the last forest, past the pipeline, the hammer release point is exactly 8 kilometers away. 8 kilometers to climb high enough. 8 kilometers to not get shot. 8 kilometers to live. And when you're doing 900 kilometers per h at 50 meters, 8 kilometers isn't far. Instantly, the Ukrainian pilot makes a decision any combat training manual would call forbidden, reckless, unwise, borderline insane. But in war, when the entire Russian air defense grid is tightening around you like a steel clamp, sometimes the most irrational choice is the only one that can save your life. He stops hiding. He stops trying to sneak under trees or terrain. He chooses total chaos, complete and absolute. Because if every Russian radar is locked on the same target at once, no system can coordinate a clean firing solution. If they can all see him, no one actually knows where he is. It's the only way to break the rhythm of an air defense network built on synchronization. And he does it by lighting full afterburner. Both RD-33s roar into bright blue-white flame, exploding like a metal torch against the black sky, rocketing the MiG-29 from 50 meters straight up like a burning bullet, lighting up the forest below for a split second. At that instant, every radar within 80 kilometers sees a signal too clear to ignore, a big, hot, fully exposed target with zero stealth. A gift-wrapped kill for any S-400 battery. The SPO-15 in the cockpit nearly explodes from signal overload. From scattered beeps to one long, urgent metallic scream. 3 directions: northeast S-400, east Buckham 3, south Torum 2, all blazing on the scope like a matrix. 3 systems lock him simultaneously. This isn't warning anymore. This is the sound of a machine predicting your death. But he can't stop. He keeps climbing. 600 M, 1000 M, 2000 M. G-force crushes him into the seat like someone sitting on his chest, edges of vision going gray. Gray out, creeping in, but he keeps pulling. Because he's not high enough yet, not to hide but to release the hammer. The bomb needs altitude for its rocket motor to boost it to the top of its arc before diving onto the target at the perfect penetration angle. Lower than that and the mission fails. The cracking tower gets scratched. The 32-truck convoy rolls out. The offensive continues. 3000 M, 4000 M. He adds one insanely dangerous move. A barrel roll while still climbing vertically. The MiG spins around its longitudinal axis, carving a chaotic corkscrew in the sky. To Russian radar, it's an unsolvable math problem. S-400 and Buckham 3 guidance is built for stable variables, velocity, heading, time. But a target twisting like a bent needle breaks every algorithm. Every time the radar predicts his next position, he's already somewhere else. And while the systems chase a phantom flight path, he hits 4,800 M, then 4,900, then 5,000. Here he rolls inverted, belly up, nose toward the ground. And that's the one and only spot in the entire mission where every condition for hammer release is perfect: altitude, range, speed, target angle. But the price is he's now sitting in the center of 3 Russian kill zones from 3 of their best air defense systems. And right at that moment, the exact second he reaches the spot the mission demands, the Russian launchers fire. Two 48N6 missiles leap off the S-400 rails at multiple times the speed of sound. Buckham 3 goes hot, Torum 2 is cleared to engage. On Russian radar screens, he's no longer a target. He is the target, the center of the entire regional air defense grid. And he has less than 40 seconds to live. Less than 40 seconds to drop the one bomb that can rip the heart out of Zarevska Refinery. Less than 40 seconds before 3 warheads weighing hundreds of kilos each turn him into scraps in the Belgorod forest. But those 40 seconds are exactly what he just climbed up here to buy. Because only here, only in this attitude, only in this moment, can the mission move into its final phase, release the hammer. In the moment when 3 Russian air defense systems all have hard locks, amid the unending scream of the SPO-15 and strobes going berserk across the panel, he holds the MiG rock steady for exactly 2 seconds, the only 2 seconds he can hope to keep the jet still long enough for the weapon to arm. In those 2 seconds, the hammer runs its entire boot sequence at electronic speed. GPS grabs 12 satellites, INS syncs acceleration data. Rocket motor checks ignition circuit. Nitrogen cooling chills the IR seeker to 40 degrees Celsius. Flight computer loads the initial trajectory. All in less than a heartbeat. When the HUD light goes green, he doesn't wait another millisecond. He punches release. The instant the 250 kilograms bomb separates from the belly, he feels the MiG jump upward, like someone just ripped a heavy backpack off his back. No time to admire it. No time to watch the weapon fall away. The second the hammer clears the jet, he rolls upright and pulls full stick into the ground, starting a dive any pilot would call suicidal. But it's the only dive that can save him now. 9.5 G. So hard his bones creak, abs crushed, blood pooling in his feet, vision narrowing to a gray tunnel, and half a G more and he'd black out completely. But he keeps pulling, keeps crushing, keeps driving the MiG from 5,000 m straight down like a metal meteor. Speed climbs 900 km per h, 1,000 km per h. Mach 1.05. Air slams the wings like giant fists, shockwaves exploding off the fuselage as he punches through the sound barrier. Meanwhile, behind him up in the sky he just left, 2 S-448N6s are streaking toward where they predicted he'd be. But their prediction was based on a pilot climbing straight, not a pilot who suddenly folded and dove supersonic toward the dirt. Russian radars can't keep up with that axis change. The moment he drops below their minimum look-down angle, S-400 loses lock. The missiles fly blind for a few more seconds, searching for a return they'll never get, then self-destruct above 8,000 m, 2 meaningless fireballs in the night. To the east, the Buk M3 makes a different mistake. It picks up the infrared signature of the hammer climbing to its apex. And because the bomb can't maneuver, can't jam, can't jink, the Buk's guidance thinks it's the perfect target. It locks hard onto the bomb itself as it arcs toward 8,000 m before diving on the refinery. $1 million shot at something flying a ballistic path. Shooting the bullet after it left the barrel. Satisfying, but pointless. Meanwhile, the MiG is already down to 300 m, then 200, then leveling at 120 m. One of the rare altitudes where Russian radar gets cluttered by terrain, and the jet is low enough to weave safely. But safe is relative. Because when he lit afterburner to climb a few seconds ago, the 2RD-33 drank nearly 400 kilograms of fuel in under half a minute. The gauge is now at a number any pilot hates to see, enough to get home if he flies perfectly, and only if he flies perfectly. No extra maneuvers. No afterburner. No lapse in concentration. No tiny mistakes. Every control input now is like shaving with a razor. One slip and there's no way home. But he keeps flying, threading the MiG over low hills, following the pipeline back toward Ukraine, fast enough to stay off radar, slow enough to nurse fuel, while behind him the hammer finishes its climb and begins its terminal dive toward Zarevska Refinery, like the hammer of a war god. And here's what I want you to understand. Sometimes a war isn't shifted by a huge battle, not by thousands of soldiers, not by massed artillery. Sometimes one strike can change a campaign. One perfectly placed hit on the enemy's weakest point. One bomb, right target, right moment. And tonight, if this succeeds, it doesn't just destroy a refinery. It can derail Russia's entire winter offensive. It can save thousands from the barrages scheduled for tomorrow. It can shift the axis of the whole campaign. By the time the MiG-29 has vanished from every friendly radar, and all that's left is darkness and a fuel state that would make any pilot hold his breath, the hammer is still on its own cold, steady, almost emotionless journey. After separating, it climbs above 8,000 m, then reactivates all sensors. From up high, the entire Zharevska refinery appears on the IR seeker like a giant heat map, the cracking tower glowing white-hot like a reactor core. Distillation columns showing as pale yellow fire pillars, the pipeline farms stretching below like hot red arteries, cooling ponds a cold gray blue. Heat signatures, shapes, structures, thermal deltas, all match. The bomb's processor identifies the cracking unit in under a tenth of a second. A 2.3-degree correction is made, too small for the human eye, but enough to put it on the perfect dive line. 8 kilometers away, a Ukrainian drone loiters at safe altitude, watching everything through infrared. Its operator zooms in, finger on the record button. On the screen, a small white dot accelerates by the millisecond. 7 seconds, he whispers. 6. Down on the ground, the refinery is running like any normal night. Industrial lights on. Pipes hot, no alarms, no warnings, no one knows something is coming. 5, 4, 3. AI shows predicted impact converging dead center on the cracking unit. 2, 1. At over 340 m/s, equivalent to a car hitting a wall at 3,000 km/s, the hammer punches straight into the cracking tower. The smart fuse sees heat-resistant steel and detonates instantly. The explosion doesn't bloom into a fireball first. It starts with a crushing overpressure, nearly 300,000 psi, collapsing the metal from the inside, the entire structure imploding in milliseconds. Only then does fire appear. First a red-orange flash, then a jet of burning gas rips open the pipeline running along the east side. A river of fire erupts like someone just lit a fuel river. Crude storage tanks ignite in a domino chain, secondary explosions feeding a fire column over 200 meters high. The shockwave is so strong, the drone overhead wobbles. Less than 40 seconds. That's all it took for Zharevska refinery, one of the last facilities keeping Russia's winter campaign from stalling, to collapse from the inside. And here's the strategic point. Zharevska accounted for roughly 28% of refining capacity in Russia's entire western cluster. When it's gone, Russian units instantly lose their allocated fuel, forcing them to pull from refineries farther away, Orel, Voronezh, adding 180-240 kilometers to every resupply run. That slows everything. Maneuver speed, fire schedules, logistics tempo, and in war, especially winter war in eastern Ukraine, that delay can be the difference between a successful offensive and a campaign collapse. One bomb, one target, an entire planned barrage for the next day cancelled. In Kharkiv and Kupiansk, that might save hundreds of lives. At the operational level, it forces Russia to rethink its entire tempo. At the strategic level, it proves that sometimes a single precise strike, from a country fighting for survival with the most modest tools, can shake a giant military machine. And that's why tonight's strike matters. Not tomorrow, not next week. Right now. If this story helped you understand what's really happening on the ground, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdowns. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.